We want to take you live to a press conference now where the Toronto Maple Leafs are introducing new head coach Craig Berube. Let's listen in.
Thanks for everybody for joining us today. Apologize for the Friday long weekend announcement at 5 o'clock. It's just when everything comes together, we'd like to get our news out, and that's when it happened to come together. So we're excited today to formally announce and introduce Craig Berube. Just to walk you through a short timeline and process here. It was almost 2 weeks ago, I guess, or just under 2 weeks ago that we sat here in front of you in our year-end press conference, and obviously I said at that time that the top priority was to find the next coach and the new head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Really from that day forward, that's really what I've immersed myself into, and it's been sort of a nonstop process over that time. First step was really to identify a profile. Before we started to get out into the field and meet and talk with candidates, it was really to build a profile of the individual that we felt was going to come in and be the best fit. And really that's what we were looking here, is understanding what you have as an organization, what you think is the best fit, and then go and try to find the individual that fits those characteristics. After that, I met and talked with several individuals. I'm not going to necessarily get into names and whatnot, but I think it was upwards of 9 individuals that I met with or spoke with, and had obviously during that time had a chance to speak and meet with Craig and spent a lot of time with Craig. And as I went through the process with other individuals, it kept coming back to Craig. And for a number of things, when I look at I look at Craig's background. Number one is his playing career. He's touched every step on the ladder in terms of where he sits now as a head coach in the NHL. Was a player, longtime player, 1,000 games in the league, assistant coach, head coach in the American Hockey League, an assistant coach in the National Hockey League, and then ultimately a head coach in the National Hockey League. I look at Craig as a longtime organizational man in the Philadelphia Flyers organization. That to me is meaningful. Craig had been there, had done every job in a rich tradition franchise such as Philadelphia. Really the first time he ventured out of that organization was to one other organization, St. Louis, who I consider one of the most successful teams over the last decade. He won a championship there. The homework you do with people that worked for, and played for Craig is you have players that, to me, talked about how they would go through a wall for him. The connection that he had with his players, the accountability that he had with his players, the bond that he was able to build with staff. Ultimately, character matters. Character matters. It matters with your team, and it matters most importantly with your head coach. I look at Craig, and ultimately what brought me back to him was his leadership, his ability to build teams and have a team-first concept, his ability to connect with players, and his ability to hold people accountable. So it gives me great pleasure and an honor to introduce the next head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, Craig Berube.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Brendan, ownership, for giving me the opportunity to be the Maple Leafs head coach. It's a huge honor, obviously. Great franchise, original 6. I had the opportunity to play here for a little bit way back in the day, and it's nothing but first class here in a first-class organization, and I'm very honored to be the head coach.
Thank you, Coach. Please raise your hand for a question. We'll start with Kevin McGran here.
Craig, welcome. Nice to meet you. Just wondering what you think of the team that just finished this season. Obviously, there's a lot of speculation about change. Mitch Marner, John Tavares. What do you think of what you saw, and what do you think of the core players that you have going forward?
Well, I was one of the attractions. The core player group is great here. I mean, they got some great players here, and that was definitely one of the attractions to come and coach this team. Watching the playoffs this year with them, I thought that, there's already that change kind of going on with how they want to be built and play, and that's Brad bringing that in. And again, talking with Brad and Brendan in the conversations, we're on the same page, and I think that's important. And again, that was one of the big attractions is, we got some real good players here.
Lance?
Craig, can you talk about who has reached out to you so far on the team and who you have maybe spoken to as well in the past 3 days since you were named?
Yeah, I've made contact with most of the team, to be honest with you. On the phone, met some guys in person here too, but I've talked to pretty much everybody on the team already. It's been great support. I'm looking forward to working with these guys.
Terry Koshan?
Hey, Craig. Welcome to Toronto.
Yeah, thank you.
The Leafs are known for 100-point seasons under Sheldon Keefe. Couldn't get it done in the playoffs. What in your mind has to be different once we get to next spring, and how do you get to the group to a spot that it hasn't been to yet?
Repeat that question again.
Just the Leafs have a history of 100-point seasons, 3 in a row now under Sheldon. Couldn't get it done in the playoffs. What can you bring that'll help that team get over that hump, do you think, once the playoffs begin next spring? Provided the Leafs.
Yeah, well, that stuff's in the past, to be honest with you. I'm focused on now and the future, and I'm going to obviously bring my own style here and how we want to play the game. And again, Brad and Brendan are on board with that. They think a lot similar to myself, and so all I can do is focus on now and going forward. How we want to build the team here and how we want to look on the ice.
Mark?
Brendan, over here, there was video of you and Craig dropping the gloves back in the day, making the rounds over the weekend. I'm curious, what are your memories of playing against Craig, and what stands out to you about him as a coach?
Yeah, I've seen that video, and I remember. Look, I've probably had hundreds of fights in the NHL. Craig probably had more than 200 fights in the NHL. I remember that one in particular. I think I was around 19. When I came in as an 18-year-old, I was playing in the bottom six and playing a lot against Craig. And then about halfway through my second year, I got put on the first line and doing really well in the first line. And Craig came up to me at the end of a game and said, well, I guess you're not going to fight us guys anymore. And I said, let's go. And at the end of the fight, I said, you know what? He might have had it right. Maybe I should stop doing that. But he was a competitor. He was a guy that you always knew when he was on the ice. And he's translated that to his career in coaching. We had more than that run in itself as well. Like throughout our careers, we had a Stanley Cup final against each other later on in the 90s, and he was just a guy that played a long time and played the same way a long time, and was a great teammate. And going through this process, bringing it back to us searching for our next head coach, the more people you dug into and the more layers that more information you got. The feedback was even more positive. It just felt like things that we were hoping for, things that we saw were confirmed. I thought it was interesting that it was specifically with some of the players that we reached out to that have played for him, and it was first liners, it was fourth liners, it was Canadian guys, it was European guys, players that played different styles and had different backgrounds, and yet they all came back to us with the same message that he's a great coach, a great person, and as Brad said, I'd go through a wall for the guy. So it was impressive as we went through the interview process, what we learned more and more of Craig.
David Alter in the middle there.
Hey, Craig.
Yeah.
There were a lot of teams reportedly interested in you. You spent the year kind of waiting it out. What was the driving force that led you to picking Toronto and Toronto picking
Well, obviously, if you look at the roster, you know, first and foremost, I mean, like I talked about, there's some great players here, and a great opportunity to build a team that, you know, can move forward and become something, you know, not better, but, you know, get over the hump a little bit here. And the other thing is, you know, again, you want to work with good people, and beside me here is great people, and again, thinking this a lot like I do on how we want to build a team and how we want to play. So, I mean, that's the attraction. And then also, you know, anytime I think, you know, for me personally, a Canadian-born kid, you get a chance to coach Toronto Maple Leafs. You know, for me, I'm going to jump on that.
Steve Simmons, middle row there.
Craig, hi, Steve Simmons from the Toronto Sun.
How are you?
Good to see you again.
You too.
Last time I think was in the dressing room here as a player.
Oh,
Not
here.
Give or take a week.
Rink.
Yeah. You've played for some really interesting coaches over the years.
Yeah.
You've coached with some really interesting coaches over the years to get to this point. Who have had the greatest influences on you to get to where you are, and who have you learned the most from?
Yeah, there's a few guys. I think first and foremost, when I broke into the league as a player, Paul Holmgren was an assistant coach, became a head coach. And then when I retired and I started coaching, you know, Paul Holmgren and Bob Clark brought me in as a coach. So, you know, Paul was a real mentor for me as a young player. You know, similar style to him, but he was a better player. But, you know, he just mentored me really well as a player and as a coach. Learned a lot from him. You know, he was great. John Stevens was my first coach, head coach in the Philadelphia Phantoms, and I became an assistant coach under him. And, you know, he taught me a lot about the game and coaching. And also Ken Hitchcock was down the hall, so Hitch was available all the time. And Hitch and I go back to junior days. So, you know, in St. Louis, I was working with Hitch daily. He was a consultant. So I've been around Ken Hitchcock a lot, and obviously he's a great coach, you know, and learned a lot from all these guys. So, you know, I think those three guys had a big impact on my playing career and my coaching career.
Top row here, Sean Leothon.
Craig, how you doing?
Good.
When you coached against the Leafs, what were the areas you identified to try and beat them, and how would you change this team?
Well, first, I think, you know, when you're playing the Toronto Maple Leafs, you look at some of the high-end talent they have, and you got to do a good job of shutting those guys down and making sure that, you know, they're a priority for sure. You know, obviously the power play, being disciplined, not taking penalties, you know, things like that. And, you know, it didn't, when we were playing the Leafs, I was more focused on our team and playing our style of game. But obviously, like I talk about, you know, there's some great players here that you got to be aware of out there for sure.
We'll go front row, Rosie DiBenno.
Hi, Craig. Welcome.
Hi.
Teams often take on the character of their coach.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, what does a Craig Berube team look like? How does it play hockey?
Well, listen, first, you know, competitive. You know, we don't want to get outworked ever. We want to be highly competitive every night, and it's all about the team for me. You know, that's one of the things I really focus on, and that's part of building a team. Everybody's important on the team. Everybody's got to be used on the team, and they all have jobs and roles on the team, and that's a real important aspect for me. You know, we want to play a north game. We want to play fast. We want to be a heavy team. When I talk about heaviness, it's not, you know, running guys through boards and fighting and all that stuff. You know, listen, the game's changed, but you still have to be strong on pucks. You got to win puck battles. Those are priorities for me, and just playing predictable and north, and playing as fast as we can. Structure is huge, and we got to have structure in all three zones, and that's going to be a priority.
Middle row here with Dave McCarthy, NHL.com.
Hey, Craig. One of the hallmarks of your coaching ability seems to be your ability to hold players accountable, but to do it in a constructive fashion. How have you determined is the best way to hold players accountable, but keep everybody moving in a positive direction while doing so?
Well, first, to hold players accountable and for players to understand the accountability, you have to form a partnership throughout. I think it starts in the summertime, getting to know these players, them getting to understand what I'm all about and how I'm going to coach and how I'm going to coach each individual and the team. And, so then when you have to hold the player accountable for whatever, and it could be ice time, it could be whatever the situation is, they understand it more. And communication is huge. And I think one of my strengths is I'm a great communicator with my players. They know where they stand. I'm going to tell them when they're playing well. I'm going to tell them when they're not playing well. I'm going to tell them if things that need to be improved upon. There's all types of things. So accountability is accepted almost by your players when you have that partnership.
We'll go top row. Jonas Siegel for Athletic.
Brad, you mentioned up here. You mentioned building a profile for a coach. What did that profile look like?
It started with, I think, and Craig just touched on it now. I think I touched on it when I came in here. The importance of team, and it sounds motherhoodish, and it sounds a little bit cliche-ish. But number one, you need everyone, right? We've talked in this market here. This is not about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. It's about a team. It's about the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the outside can use all catchy phrases about core 4s and 5s and 3s and 4s and 5s. It's about a team, and the ability, number one, to build a team, the ability to connect with players. I think Craig put it well. We all talk about accountability. Accountability is the ability to hold people accountable, push people. Those are really important things, because really at the end of the day, we're all watching what's being played right now. It's real difficult, right? To have success at this time of the year is very difficult, and you've got to be able to push people into uncomfortable positions and into uncomfortable things. Well, to me, you have to connect with people first. There has to be a partnership, a relationship, and a trust. And so that was part of the profile. I think in a lot of ways, you somebody that can command respect. Presence is an important thing for me. Craig, to me, you either have it or you don't. Craig has it. And then when you really talk with people around the game, people that I trust, people that I know, his ability to teach, as one former teammate and one former coach of his said, he's quietly brilliant, right? So he knows the tactical part of the game. So those are all the areas that I think are really important, and certainly feel Craig touches all those areas.
We'll go middle row here, Matt Larkin, Hockey News.
Brad, you mentioned being pleased, getting the sense that players want to go through a wall for Craig. Just to tie that to the motivation of this team in crunch time in previous runs and this year specifically, do you think motivation or the lack of it in key moments was a problem? And is that one of the main reasons why Craig is here now?
No, and I don't want it to be taken. When I talk about things that I was looking for or things that I think are important, please don't insinuate that we didn't have that before. I said it the day. I think Sheldon Keefe is a wonderful coach. I think he's a tremendous coach. I think he's going to do great things in this league. And I think he's an even better person. So that's not, don't take one for thinking that we didn't have the other. I just think it was time. We needed something different. We needed a different delivery, a different voice giving the delivery. And like I said, Craig comes at it in a different way. And, listen, I've been here a year, but I understand. We've been here as an organization for a number of years. And so all you got to keep knocking on the door. You got to keep knocking on the door. And to me, you find every different avenue, whether it be from a coaching standpoint, player personnel, tactical, every other way to push through that door. And to me, Craig, like I said, I was, as we started this process, I think we were very fortunate to have somebody of Craig's ability available. That doesn't happen all the time. And I just think he's a great match. I think he's just a perfect fit for the group where we're at right now.
Steve Simmons, middle row.
Craig, virtually every coach I've ever spoken to says you're only as good as your goaltending. That said, who is and what is your goaltending?
Well, that's something that Brad, myself, Brendan are going to discuss, and we're going to look at all areas. And you know, that's not for today. Yeah, but again, like I said, we're not. That's not for today to discuss. That's discussions that we're going to have here going forward, and hopefully we'll figure that out soon.
I think just to piggyback on that, Steve, obviously we, as part of this process, you go through roster, you know, of what we've got right now. You know, Craig giving me his thoughts, me giving him my thoughts. But, you know, today's day one of, you know, we're going through the process of how we build a team. We're going to start digging in today from everything from, obviously we have a staff to look at, and Craig will have those discussions with guys that are here and figure out where we go from there. And then most importantly, dig right into our roster and you know, get to work on that.
Middle row here, Elliot Friedman.
Craig, you've always been praised for your honesty and your bluntness. Do you think at all when you come to a market like this one, you have to be careful about how much you use it publicly? Because, you know, we jump on a lot of things here that get used and parsed. Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, and I don't really bring that up publicly very often. You know, I could think of a couple times I have done that, but for the most part, it's all internal. It's with my players, management. But I keep that stuff internal for the most part.
Up top row, Greg Ross.
Right here. Craig, are there any additional challenges for coaches coming into a market like this where the team's number one? There's a lot more media attention, a lot more social media attention these days, and probably a lot more demands on your roster of players.
Oh, there is for sure, and I think you know, that's all part of the job. And you know, if you want to come here and coach, then you got to you already understand that, and which I do. And you know, like I said, I mean, I get all that, but you know, I'm still it's not going to be weighing on my shoulders at all.
We're going to do two final ones, Kevin and then Terry.
Brad, Craig referenced the talent that's here is one of the reasons that he really wanted to come here. Where does things stand with some of that talent come July 1st? You've got Mitch Marner, possible extension or something else, maybe John Tavares and Domi and Bertuzzi, who proved to be quite important players in the playoffs. Where do things go with those guys?
Yeah, great questions, Kevin, and we'll see is I guess with the answer. We haven't got to that really. From the day I last saw all of his, I went to work on the coaching search, and that file has been all encompassing until this past weekend. We've got our amateur scouts in town. We're going through our amateur scouting meetings, you know, yesterday, today, tomorrow. We've got our pro scouting meetings beginning at the end of the week. And then we dig into our player personnel. And as I said, at the end of the year, we're going to look at everything. We've got some really good players, and we don't want to lose sight of that, lose sight of the fact of that. But, you know, now Craig and I will sit down and we'll start to dig into all the other areas that, you know, roster, construction, all those types of things, and we've got a busy summer ahead.
Last question here, Terry.
Hey, Craig, what are your plans for the rest of your staff now going forward?
Well, again, that's stuff we got to talk about. We're going to look at all the areas. I know there's coaches here already. One that I worked with before, but we got to discuss all that stuff with Brad and Brendan.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Thanks, everybody. We're going to just take a moment here to pose for a photo.
You're just listening to the Toronto Maple Leafs introducing Craig Berube as the 41st head coach in franchise history. They're now getting together for a family photo. We'll tell you a little bit more about this new coach. He's an NHL veteran. He led the St. Louis Blues to a Stanley Cup title in 2019. The Leafs, of course, hoping Craig Berube will be able to work his magic here in Toronto. He replaces Sheldon Keefe, who was fired just weeks ago after another disappointing playoff season. The new coach attending his very first press conference in this city, taking questions from reporters. He says he's excited. He's already spoken with the players and says he will bring his own style as coach. He was also asked about his very straight up, blunt style, and he says he will hold players accountable. He'll tell them when they're playing well. He will also tell them when they are not playing well.